snow of the season arrived without announcement, the way all the most important things do, settling on a village in early hours, covering the cobblestones and the iron benches and the one old fountain that never quite stops dripping, even in the coldest winter. By the time Elise arrived at the bakery, the square outside the window was white and silent and perfect, the snow unmarked yet by footsteps, holding the last of the dark as the sky above the mountains began its slow brightening toward morning. She had been at the bakery since 4 in the morning. This was not unusual. She liked the hours before the village woke, the particular quality of darkness that softens into gray before it becomes light, the way flour rose into the air and settled on her forearms, the reliable warmth of the oven against the coal coming through the stone walls. She liked being the first person to know what the day smelled like. This morning it smelled of cardamom and of snow coming in under the door, and of wood smoke from somewhere close. Someone else also awake early, tending their own warmth in the dark. Theo came in just before 6. The bell above the door announced him. He was wearing a coat she hadn't seen before, dark wool, snowflakes melting on the shoulders before he'd even stepped all the way inside. And when he looked at her, his face did the thing it had been doing lately. Something unguarded and warm. Something he perhaps didn't entirely know was showing. He had arrived in the village in September, for reasons he had described once, briefly as needing to be somewhere smaller for a while. She had understood this without requiring elaboration. She was a person who had also once needed somewhere smaller, and had come here, and had stayed. The village had that effect on people who were genuinely looking for something rather than only running from something. It has something of you in return for its quiet. It asked you to actually be here, in the actual mornings, in the actual cold, doing the actual work of a life. Most people found this harder than expected. The ones who stayed were the ones who found it easier than expected. She had recognized this in him early. The quality of someone who was here rather than elsewhere in his own mind. The particular attentiveness of a person who had decided to pay attention to the actual life in front of them rather than some other version of things. In the bakery, which she had run for 9 years, she had learned to read people quickly and to trust the reading. She had read him clearly from the first week. Falling in love, Elise was discovering, is largely composed of noticing the way someone moves through a room as if the room is glad they're there, of noticing which stories they choose to tell, and which they keep carefully folded inside themselves, specific in mind, and then noticing that you are noticing this and understanding what it means. She'd been noticing him for 11 weeks. The way he listened when she talked about the bread. Genuinely listened, not merely waited. The questions he asked afterward that showed he had been thinking about what she said had let it develop somewhere in him, had come back with a follow-up that arrived a week later, as if the thought had been quietly maturing. She'd noticed the way he held his coffee cup in both hands. She'd noticed that he thanked her for things twice, once when he received them, and once days later, when he mentioned how good they had been. She had noticed that he apologized for nothing that wasn't his fault, and for everything that was. She had noticed all of this with the careful attention of someone who has learned to observe things she is not ready to act on. She was working slowly on this habit of hers. She thought about the particular bravery required to act on a feeling in the early stages before it is hardened into certainty, when it is still soft and slightly translucent, like bread dough, still forming, still becoming what it will eventually be. The bravery of moving towards something that might not be moving toward you. The specific courage of someone who has decided that the discomfort of uncertainty is preferable to the safety of not knowing. She had been choosing the safety of not knowing for a long time. It was a reasonable choice. It had served her. But this morning, in the bakery, in the snow, she found herself less interested in reasonable choices than she had been before, less interested in safety as a governing principle, more interested in what it would feel like to simply move toward the thing that had been drawing her for 11 weeks without making her wait any longer. He sat at the corner table this morning, the one with the view of the snow-covered square, and she brought him his coffee and a plate of the cardamom rolls she'd been experimenting with, and watched his face when he tasted one. He closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, he looked at her with an expression that was partly about the cardamom, and partly she thought about something else entirely. Something that had been accumulating quietly, the way the snow had accumulated in the night, settling so gently that she didn't notice until morning, when the whole world was white. She went back behind the counter. She made herself do the things that needed doing. The morning accounts, the second batch, the window display. She did them deliberately with the attention of someone using work as ballast against a feeling that might otherwise tip her. Outside, the snow kept falling, softly now, the first urgency of it over, settling into the patient version that goes on for hours. The mountain behind the village was invisible square was acquiring footprints now. The first of the morning, the village beginning to move through its day. The baker and the school teacher and the man with the dog that barked at its own shadow, all of them out in the new snow, leaving their marks in it. She thought, I am not objective about this. She thought, I have not been objective about this for some time now. She thought, this is what it feels like when something becomes important without your permission, when it has grown too large and too real to continue pretending you do not see it. He came to the counter eventually, as he always did, to return his plate and linger in the particular way that was not quite lingering. That was doing the other thing, the thing that precedes a question you haven't decided to ask yet. She recognized this in him because she did it herself, had been doing it for weeks. They were both, she thought, extremely good at standing near a thing they wanted and not quite moving toward it. You should see it from the back, she said. The mountain with the snow. There's a window in the back room. He followed her. This was not a large thing, and it was also the largest thing. She led him through the back of the bakery, past the shelves of stored flour, the cooling racks, the small table where she ate her own breakfast at 5 in the morning before the day required anything of her, and she was aware the whole time of him close behind her, the warmth of his presence in the narrow space, the sound of his footsteps on the stone floor. She thought about what she was doing. She told herself it was simply the view. The mountain in the first snow was worth seeing, and she had wanted to share it. This was true. It was not the whole truth. The whole truth was that she had found herself wanting to be alone with him in a quieter part of the bakery, away from the counter and the window onto the square, in a space that was more private, more hers. She'd invented the mountain as a reason, and then followed the reason to see what would happen next. She thought, I am braver than I thought I was. And then, or I am simply less willing than I thought to keep doing this the way I've been doing it. She thought about the first Saturday. She had come to the market with a list, as she always did, a careful enumeration of what she needed for the week, organized by section of the market so she could move through it efficiently. She'd moved through it efficiently for years. She had arrived at a stall somewhere in the middle of the list, bought what she needed, moved on. But she had registered him. That was the first Saturday. Registration. Something noted without being named. A face she knew she would look for the following week, though she'd not yet admitted she would look for it. And she had looked for it, and found it. Every Saturday, reliably, was doing the work they were supposed to be doing and finding it sufficient. She had found this quality more interesting than she had expected. She kept finding it more interesting. 14 Saturdays of finding it more interesting. 14 Saturdays of the interest growing very quietly into something that was not quite interest anymore and had not yet been named. It happened at the window. She had come to show him the snow, the view from the back of the bakery, where the mountain rose above the rooftops, and the pine trees were now white-shouldered and still. The whole landscape simplified by winter into shapes and silence. He stood beside her, very close. Their reflections overlapped in the cold glass. She turned to say something about the light, but he was already looking at her, not at the snow. And what she saw in his face stopped whatever the sentence had been going to be. He was looking at her the way you look at something you are afraid might not be there when you turn back. He reached up and brushed a strand of hair from her face, a gesture so ordinary it destroyed her, his fingers barely grazing her temple, her cheekbone, the curve of her ear. His touch was careful and wondering, the way you touch something new and delicate, as if afraid to leave a mark. She felt the warmth of his fingertips trace down her jaw and come to rest there, cradling the side of her face with a tenderness she hadn't expected from him, from herself, from any of this. His eyes held hers for a long moment, dark, intent, unguarded. And she could see the exact moment he decided, not bravely, not dramatically, quietly, the way all real decisions are made. He kissed her softly. His lips were warm against the cold morning, and she felt the contrast of it. His warmth, the chill air, the snow beyond the glass. Like the world had arranged itself into before and after with this point as the hinge. Her hand rose to the front of his coat. Not pulling, just landing. His other hand found her waist. He kissed her slowly, unhurriedly, as though there were no bakery to open, and no snow to account for, and no time at all beyond this one. She could feel his heart through the layers of wool and cotton, or perhaps it was her own. Perhaps by then the difference no longer mattered. She kissed him back with everything she'd been holding carefully for 11 weeks. All the noticing, all the cataloging, all the deliberate observing of someone who was not outside held still in its white. The snow kept falling, and the bakery held its warmth around them like a kept promise. Outside, the snow